Sanlam has conducted research which says that only 46% of women have wills, just under 20% compared to the 63% of men who do have them. Moremadi Mabule, who's the head of wills operations at Sanlam Trust, joins me live. Very good afternoon to you. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. How was this research conducted and what were some of the other highlights that emerged from it?
So we did a survey. Thank you so much for having us. We did a survey and we asked questions in terms of, the understanding of wills and the reasons why people don't have wills. And it was, several questions that were asked, and based on that, we obviously got the feedback that people don't have wills because, there's myths and misconceptions around wills itself. One of them being, I don't have enough assets. And based on that, we categorized the survey in terms of how many people were women, how many were men. We also went further and looked at race and what are the reasons that were provided. And the most misconception is that I don't have enough. A will is for the wealthy. The second one is that it's a cumbersome process and also it's an expensive process to go through. Mm-hmm. So that's basically what came out of the survey.
All right. What's the importance then of having a will, in particular for women? And then also answer the question that you said a lot of your respondents had in terms of feeling as though they didn't have enough assets to have a will.
Yes. So the importance of having a will is, you get to have the final say. And throughout the process, we also looked at behavioral science. What makes people actually shy away from actually doing a will? Because a lot of times it's like, okay, the information around wills, people know it, but having to take that action to go and do a will, it looks like now it seems to be a problem. And that is because people, firstly, having to make decisions around who's going to get what with in your will is a challenge. People don't want to make those decisions as yet. And based on that, maybe they're missing an opportunity to exercise what we call freedom of testation. And freedom of testation basically says, you have the final say. You get to choose who's going to get what. On the issue around it being a cumbersome process and an expensive process, it is not. It's based on your needs. Anybody can actually draw up a will. It can be as basic as possible. It's basically exercising freedom of testation, making a choice in terms of why, who's going to be getting what. And if you are a woman and a mother, I think it's also important, it's an opportunity to actually nominate a guardian because you can only do that nomination if you put it in a will form.
Mm-hmm. What should you think about when drafting a will?
Very important question. What must go into a will and what should I think about? I spoke about women being mothers, and I don't want to single out only to women. Also, if you are a parent, some of the things that you need to look at is in the event that the other parent passes away, what's going to happen to those minor children if you've got minor children. The second thing that is important that you put in your will, we've got people who are saying, I'll just draw it up and put it at home somewhere, and they forget to nominate an executor, which is something very crucial in terms of getting a will drafted, because you can have a will, being clear in terms of who needs to get what, but then you don't nominate an executor. Then people have to run around trying to figure out who's going to be assisting them as an executor. That is an important thing that people miss, an opportunity of nominating an executor and also nominating a trust. In the event that you've got minor children, you want to set up a testamentary trust for those minor children, making sure that, there is that continuation. So I always say to people, there is wealth creation, there is wealth preservation, but also you want to make sure that it lands in the right hands. And you can only do it if you do a will. And those who are married, an important thing is that, you need to sit down and understand your finances based on your marital regime as well. When you're drawing up a will, you want to make sure that it executable, meaning whatever wishes that you are putting in the will based on who owns what in the assets, it's going to go to the rightful people. You mustn't find that, you know what, you are married in community of property, you are bequeathing half a share and it's not necessarily executable. So that is quite important that you look at that. And one last point that I think I want to touch as an important aspect when you're drawing up a will is to make sure that there is enough liquidity. One of the surprises, and I think in the survey it came out as, you know what, this is an expensive exercise. One of the surprises that happens when somebody passes away is the expenses that comes with dying. The first being, it could be tax implications in terms of estate duty. It could be executors' fees, because that's another thing that people don't actually think about it when they're drawing up a will, that who's going to be paying for these expenses, and funeral expenses, you've got master's fees. There's a lot of other expenses that come through when somebody passes away. And I think a lot of people don't plan around that.
Mm-hmm. At what point in your life and career should you have a will, and how do you do it, especially if you don't want to spend a lot of money on making sure that you've got a will that you've spoken about?
So at what point? The Wills Act is saying, you know, it's quite clear in terms of the age that a person can start having a will, but people would say, but I've got nothing, so why must I have a will? I think, you know what, I always say, because when we experience life-changing circumstances, for example, like a financial change in your space, maybe your first employment, you start working, you start accumulating assets. That is the time that you actually need to start thinking about estate planning and grow into that habit of making sure that it's up to date. So when you start working, whereas you complete your nomination form with your employer for your pension funds, draw up a will that will deal with assets that you are accumulating as more life-changing experiences are happening, events are happening in your life, like getting married, children, accumulating more assets. Make sure that your will is up to date at any given time. And I think that is an important thing that we miss out. We find a lot of times that people could have drawn up a will, and when they pass away, it's such an outdated document, and that's why there's a lot of, you know, pushbacks and disputes that come through with that.
Moremadi Mabule, Sanlam Head of Wills Operation in South Africa, joining us today as South Africa marks Wills Week, and just giving us insight into what you need to think about when planning a will and when you should have one. Thanks so much for your time.